Hey everyone! Today we are going to draw some cubes in 1-point perspective. Label the top of your page 1-point perspective. Also make room on your paper to write the steps down and write this important information. The rule is lines are only vertical, horizontal, and converging. This will make more sense in a minute. There are exceptions to the rule if you're not drawing a cube. You need a sharp pencil. I'm using an HB. A 2B is fine, but definitely don't use a 6B. Mechanical pencil is fine for this as well. And you need a ruler or a straight edge. I'm going to start by putting my ruler in the middle of my paper. Make sure that your horizontal line is perfectly horizontal. So have your ruler flush to the edge of your paper and then lightly draw your line across the middle of the paper. I'm going to draw a little bit darker than I normally would so you can see this a little bit better. Label this your horizon line. This is also called your eye level. The horizon line is always at the level that your eyes are at. And then put a point in the middle of your horizon line and label this vanishing point. We are going to start by drawing a cube in the upper right part of your paper. In order to start a cube, the first step is to draw a square. So write this down in step 1. My square is going to be about 1 inch by 1 inch. And you do want to make sure that you have perfectly vertical and perfectly horizontal lines. In order to make sure my lines are perfectly vertical and horizontal, I'm using my paper as a reference. So I can always make sure that I have my inch markings kind of even with the edge of my paper, and that will make my perfect horizontal or vertical lines. Step 2 is connecting the corners of your square to the vanishing point. I'm putting VP for vanishing point. So that means I am going to line up my ruler or straight edge with the edge or the corner of my square and make sure that your ruler is also in line with your vanishing point and lightly connect the corner to the vanishing point. A lot of these lines we're going to erase later, so you don't need to make them very dark. Corner to vanishing point. And make sure that you have a crisp corner and make sure that you don't make your vanishing point huge because you do want this to be very precise. And these lines are called converging lines. Converging lines are your lines that go to your vanishing point. They would be the side of your box that's going back in space. The word converge means to meet. So all of these lines are meeting at your vanishing point. Step 3 is going to be closing off the sides of your box. You can decide if you want your box to be narrow or if you want your box to be deeper. Very, very important on this step is to make sure that you are keeping the side of your box perfectly vertical. So line up your ruler with this line here and make sure this is vertical. Also, I'm checking with my ruler in the edge of my paper to make sure that my ruler isn't kind of crooked on accident. And then I'm going to close off the bottom with a perfectly horizontal line. And I'm making the horizontal line obviously meet that vertical line. So when you look at this, these three lines should be parallel and perfectly vertical. And these three lines should be parallel and perfectly horizontal. And then the only other lines I have are my converging lines. So to draw a cube, again, you only have vertical, horizontal, and converging lines. If I were drawing like the letter A or the letter W, that's when you would have an exception to this rule. So that was our step 3. Is close off your side and bottom. And then you can have a step 4. This is kind of optional right now for practice, but for a final project, you would want to erase your extra converging lines. Next, draw a small cube on your own below the horizon line. I'm going to be drawing mine to the right side, and I'm going to, again, make a cube that's about 1 inch by 1 inch. Go through your steps and double check that you started with perfectly horizontal and vertical lines, and then go back and make sure that this back edge is vertical and this top is horizontal. A very common mistake is people draw their cubes with the back edge as a line that's leaning, or the top also with a line that's leaning. So if you had something like this, it wouldn't be a perfect cube, it would be some kind of trapezoid. These lines are not following our rule. They are not vertical, they are not horizontal, and they are not converging. So if you're confused about converging lines, ask yourself, is this line going to a vanishing point? It is not. I call these lines to nowhere because they aren't following our rules and they don't make any sense to draw your cube. So double check that you don't have a line at the back that's not vertical and that you don't have a line at the top that isn't horizontal. Next, draw a cube on the horizon line. You can choose to do this cube either sitting on the horizon line or having the horizon line going through your cube. Also, if you want to draw a rectangle instead of a square, that is fine. Since I only have 2 corners that are closest to my vanishing point, I only am connecting these corners because my box is opaque. If my box were transparent, then I would see these corners coming through, but I'm going to say this is opaque. Next, add some, for example, windows. So if I had windows on the face, because this is the face of my cube, everything would still be either vertical or horizontal. If I'm drawing on the side of my box, if I were drawing windows, for example, then I would only have vertical and converging lines. I wouldn't have any horizontal lines on the side. I just realized I forgot to close off my box. It appears that it's one really long cube going back in space all the way to my vanishing point, which could be fine, but I can also close off this side of my box. Let's get into some more complex objects. In the bottom left corner, you're going to start by drawing the face of what's going to look like a set of stairs. So remember, in 1 point perspective, you're looking at the face of your object. I'm drawing a line that is 2 inches in height by 2.5 inches. You don't have to use the exact dimensions that I use, but you can if you want. And then at the bottom of this, I'm going to go up a 1/2 inch and then go over a 1/2 inch. Make sure these lines are perfectly vertical and perfectly horizontal. This top line is longer than a 1/2 inch. If you want to keep going and make these 2 smaller kind of stairs, that's totally fine. So instead of my step 1 as drawing a square, I'm now drawing the face of my object. So it's kind of like a square with these cutouts, but that is all I need to do for my step 1. I am now ready for my step 2, which is connecting all of my corners to my vanishing point. So I'm going to line up my ruler with each of these corners and connect to my vanishing point. Next, I'm ready for my step 3, which is closing off my sides. Again, make sure that when you close these off, you are using perfectly vertical and horizontal lines. I'm going to start by making a vertical line at the very bottom. It's up to you what you want the width of your staircase to be. So I started with my vertical line, and then at the top of this vertical line, that is where I will make my horizontal line to close off my next stair or the top of that stair. And to make sure this is horizontal, I'm using the edge of my ruler and looking at the measurements to make sure they line up. Or if you're just using a straight edge, then make sure that the edge of your straight edge is flush with the edge of your paper. Keep your pencil really sharp so that you have a crisp point, or that's why you can use a mechanical pencil. Usually I don't like using mechanical pencils in the art room, but when you're doing work like this, a mechanical pencil is perfectly appropriate in order to get that really precise line. So here I have my staircase. Once you get going with this, you don't necessarily have to connect your corners all the way back to your vanishing point. You can kind of stop, but this is to make sure that you can really see how the sides or my converging lines are meeting at the vanishing point. So that way the space here is larger since this is close to us. And then this back edge is smaller because it's getting farther away. So you could even imagine that you have the other side of this, kind of if this were see-through, and then you could really see that this is bigger and that is smaller.